What is up, YouTube? We are back at the block again, getting prepped for assembly. Chilly, cloudy Sunday, poured last night, tons of storms, but starting to get a little chilly out, which is great. I love this weather. Got the block pretty much ready. Crank is in, camshaft is in. We are now getting ready to drop the pistons in. Yesterday, I filmed a thing on the piston assembly, so rings and rod bearings, all that jazz. It'll be coming out soon, maybe a couple of videos away. But we will be going through and doing a quick install on this. So let me get the tripod set up. I have all of the rods done down here. 4-inch bore, so I get to use this checkered flag performance. This came off of Amazon. I love this thing. Done it with those spanner type hose clamp deals too, and it is a pain. That makes life way easier. I did lube up the cylinders, the top sides of the cylinder wall, because the pistons are going to come down this way. And I just got to prep the rings a little bit. I'm going to throw a little bit of oil on the rings, lube up the rod caps, drop those in. But let me get the tripod set up and we'll get rolling on this block. All right, so I got you guys over here on the back half of the motor. On a Ford, cylinder number 1 is going to be your front left when you're looking at the car. So here's the front of the block. Cylinder 1 is here. Like I did mention, I have the caps on these are marked, so there's number 5 here. I actually have this cap on backwards. Fine, it's got to come apart anyway. However, on the rod itself, this is number 5. I am doing a flip-flop. On the top of the piston, you got a dot on the top crown of the piston. This goes towards the front of the block, which also means that the chamfered side of your rod goes to the back. So on this, number 5 would typically go in this direction. So dot is on the front. It would go over here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to do the flip-flop again. We are going to flip this around like so over to number 1. So 5 goes in 1, 1 goes in 5, all the way down the line. So 5 and 1 flip, 2 and 4 flip, 3 and 7 flip, 4 and 8 flip. As I mentioned a second ago, I don't know if I stated that correctly. I'm taking number 5 and putting the number 5 piston, which I'm holding in my hand right now. This is going into the number 1 hole. So essentially, normally the dot's facing forward. You can see the dot there on the front right side of the piston. This would go into number 5 like so. The chamfered edge of the rod then would face the back cheek of the crank for number 1 and 5. I'm going to flip this around so the chamfered edge is now going to face the outer cheek on number 1, and the dots are all going to face the rear. So number 5 goes in 1, 1 goes in 5, vice versa. So I'm basically flip-flopping them across. I think when my explanation, I was just thinking about what I said out loud. Could have actually been inaccurate. I made it sound like I was just going to flip this around with the dots facing forward. The chamfered edge, if I put it in 1, would face the middle where the 2 connecting rods meet, which is not what you want. You want the chamfered edge going towards the cheek of the crank. We got that roughly discussed. And drop a little oil on these rings and drop this in the hole. Assembly lube on the rod cap. A rod bearing rather. Slides in. Piston rings, make sure they kind of seat in here. And we'll drop the piston skirt into the bore, like so. Relubing the actual cap. And like I said, this chamfered edge on the cap is going to face the cheek, which in this case is going to go forward. Back to the bottom. Slide our cap on. Make sure your numbers match up. If you got a 5 on this one, which I do, the 5 will match with the 5 the 5 on the cap is going to match up to the number 5 on the connecting rod. Just going to snug these up hand tight for now. Socket and my ratchet so I don't have to spend this much time underneath the car every second. Or underneath the block rather. Not going to full torque spec or anything either. all we're doing here is snugging them up. Once I get them all together, I'll flip the motor over and torque these down. Lubing the cap first this time. If I had more space right now, I would go through and do all of these at once. It's my preferred method, but I'm short a table right now. A little oil on the ring. Got assembly lube on everything right now. I got oil on the actual cylinders, oil on the piston rings. I feel like the preferred method on this is actually to use, oh, right here, perfect thing of which you don't want. This ring came out of the groove right here, so the oil ring's actually hung up a little bit. Make sure that doesn't happen before you go to assemble these. Would not make for a good day. Much better. Again, this one's going to drop towards the back. Let me wipe my hands down real quick. Drop underneath. Guide this around the crank. Don't forget your rod caps, like I just did. And again, make sure you're matching up the numbers. And the cheek goes, or the chamfer goes towards the cheek. Just like so. And I'll rotate it. I do like to bring the crank up to the high side. People have different preferences. Some people like leaving it down low. I don't. I like bringing the crank up to the top because then I can just support the rod as I'm pounding it in with a hammer. Support the rod, just give it a couple taps and it'll seat right on the crank as quickly as possible so I don't have to worry about banging it into the journal. Let me wipe my hands off. We're going to rotate this over. I'm going to pop the other side on this in, and then actually I'll drop all the pistons in because it's messy and I don't like touching the camera when I'm covered in oil and assembly lube and grease. So we'll get those all in, then flip it over, come back, and we start torquing these down. Okay, we got the pistons all in, rods are connected, caps are on. I'm just gonna flip this block over and torque those down now. It is not a high torque. They're only 5/16 volts, which should put you in about that 25 pound range for tightness and torque. So let's give this a whirl. So I'm going to go in sequence here. Right now I got it at about 20 pounds. Get all the ones I can now. Flywheel rods, camshaft are all installed. Next up's timing chain and some other stuff, all of which I need off of this motor. The only other thing I can do right now is, what I will do is probably put this oil pump back on. Oil pump and pick up tube, Gotta go through and clean the crap out of that, so I'm not sure if I'm doing that one today yet. There we have it. We got the rods in, pistons in, crank in, camshaft in. I did just put the thrust plate back on as well, and then hooked up the oil pump and pickup screen that will work with the front sump pan, that one there. So we're pretty much about done. I think the only other things I really got to do left are disassemble the other motor, which I definitely need to clear out a ton of space for. Then I can start doing the oil pan and the... I'm really on the fence on whether or not I'm going to do those studs in this block. If I'm going to swap them, or if I am just going to run bolts. I think I got a bolt set for oil pan stuff. Got to dig through the bin. Right now I'm kind of leaning towards just throwing bolts in, but I will try and use that blue gasket from that motor because that's brand new. We'll see. Let me think about it, and then I'll come back and I start putting it back together. Okay, we're now on to the front dress. So I'm just going to do a quick time lapse while I blast the front of this apart. Off the old motor, so now we're ready to start slapping the new one back together. So basically everything I just took off of this is now going to make its way onto here. Do need to replace that cam pin, so I'm going to start with that. Then we'll put the timing set on, fuel eccentric, and try and wrestle the timing cover on. a gasket on here and clean up the gasket on the old timing cover. There, clean up the fuel pump gasket, and then slap this back on the block. Okay, got the front timing cover on. Just flip that oil pan so I can drain some of the excess oil out, and then I'm gonna start rocking and rolling, clean that out. Put the new gasket on. I still gotta look around and see if I have any bolts left, and then I'm just gonna run regular oil pan bolts for now. Try and get this thrown back together if I have the parts. If I don't have enough bolts, then this will get postponed until tomorrow. But other than that, front dress is back on minus the fuel pump that I've still got on the ground. Gotta clean that one up for a gasket and start slapping the rest of the stuff slowly together. But basically I got nothing left besides the heads that I have to take off this old motor, and then coil brackets and miscellaneous stuff, but everything else is just going to swap right onto this. Oh, I do have a new steering harmonic balancer for this as well, so unbox that and do all that, but I don't need to do that right this second. Timing chain is set, everything else is good to go. I found the oil pan bolts, got ahead of myself because I didn't feel like waiting around and I just want to do this. So I cleaned up the oil pan, got that all done. Dried the inside really well. A couple drips on the outside from spraying it down and brake clean and whatnot. But gasket is in, oil pan is in, oil pump and distributor gear or oil pump gear are all together. So we are pretty much done with this. I'm going to throw the balancer on now too. I'm going to open up that box just so I can keep them all organized. I think I'm going to throw one more coat of paint on this too once it's all done this time, because I'm less worried about having to yank this one out immediately after startup, because I'm not breaking anything really in on this other than reseating the rings. But on the roller cam, it's the same lifters, same everything else. And that water pump looks like crap, so even though it's brand new, it's just crappy cast and it surface rusted like crazy. So that's where we're at. All right, here's the one I picked up. It's the Summit 5.0 style one. I use the same one, basically the equivalent to the same one on the van, and it worked out really well. Balancer, then we got some snap rings and a bunch of spacers. Take a look at those in a little bit. I don't know what I'm gonna need or not need. Hoping this will just drop right on, but it does have a removable weight as well, so you can run it. I believe this is the one you can run at 28 or 50. So let me get this on, see how it goes. I'm looking for my timer. Let me find that and see if this lines up. So the timing marker did not end up working with the new balancer, not the marker that I had at least. It sits over on this side underneath the radiator hose on the back side of the pulley in between these two. So I drew a line there at 0. Got number 1 sitting atop that center now, just to verify. And then for a quick reference, I also labeled the top, so that's key to key, or dot to dot on the cam. So got that kind of laid out. I know that they sell another pointer that goes on this side, which is actually what I'd really like to use. So I'm gonna look up one of those. They're usually pretty cheap. Get one that will bolt on this side of the timing cover. That's what I have on my truck, and go from there. But other than that, that's a wrap for this one. Tomorrow I'll start cleaning the lifters and try and get these heads back on. Well, I got the motor all set. Well, mostly all set. To me it's done, but it's not really done. I still got to throw the heads on, intake manifold, lifters, spider, dog bones. Swap out this oil pressure sensor for the mechanical, and plug the oil dipstick tube on the block, because I will still run the one through the timing cover here. Put the motor mounts back on, hook up the transmission, and drop it back in the car. So still a ton of work to do, but got the water pump pulley on, crank pulley on. Timing is roughly set at TDC. Remarked that balancer. So I got a quick couple reference marks in white. I will do any timing adjustment ones in yellow. Fuel pump is on. Got to grab an oil filter and some other miscellaneous stuff. I'll clean up the lifters tomorrow, get those soaking, get the heads and everything else back on hopefully tomorrow. And that should be pretty much it for this build. Down and dirty, super quick, refresh. And stock cam, I'm on the fence on the heads. That motor's got beefed up valve springs, which I'm most likely going to run with this roller cam, even a stock one. That should help quite a bit in the higher revs. And I don't know, we'll see what happens. Like, comment, subscribe, all of those fun things. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys later.